Hello.
Good evening, Graham. Good evening. And it's a busy arts world at the moment, which is one way of making oneself happier at the moment. And one can't turn a blind eye to the world around us, for heaven's sake. But on the other hand, there is so much going on, which is good to see. And we're going to talk tonight about one thing that is coming up. And I'm going to suggest one thing that I've just seen that's calling itself the future of theatre, which I'm keen to discuss with you. But I think our first discussion point tonight is one of my very favourite companies, a Yorkshire company, Imitating the Dog, Leeds-based, and a long time really at the cutting edge of what would be called multimedia theatre, and an art form that has progressed from probably being dominated maybe too much by the science side of it, but gradually the balance has become stronger and stronger, and the leaders in that really are Imitating the Dog, who now use live action video technology really well, but also are totally aware of the importance of the language. And you're going to be seeing them, and I'm due there as well. February 24, February 25, they're going to be at Harrogate Theatre with their production of the Scottish play Macbeth. And Graham, so it's a company that I've loved the work of for a long time. And actually, you make an interesting point here in your suggestions that we're going to perhaps see the ghost of Andrew Manley returning as opposed to the ghost of Banquo. And I just wonder what makes you think that.
You got to remember that for an arts writer, that I've never ever seen that many truly great plays or really truly great performances. But in the 90s, I was always thinking, why don't they make stage plays more like a film, where you create an immersive environment where you forget you're watching something, you become totally wrapped up in it? And why don't they use visuals more strongly? And that sort of started happening in the 90s. When Andrew Manley was artistic director of the Harrogate Theatre, he would bring in productions occasionally like that, and he himself pushed the boundaries in stage plays in a way which is totally normal now. But at the time, he got a lot of opposition in Harrogate for having done so. For basically being a bit too creative.
Of the Harrogate Advertiser. Well, actually, let's look at his production. I think, if my memory serves me right, he actually did not one but two versions of Macbeth, but or maybe it was Romeo and Juliet that he did twice. Actually, thinking about it, where in the second version of Romeo and Juliet, he had Mercutio as a junkie shooting up, which was one hell of an image. But the Macbeth that he did was set post-apocalyptic. And the way this worked was that it was a world that had completely gone wrong. There was no electricity, and instead, everything was being run on generators. Now, Andrew did this so literally that the sound of these generators rather dominated the first half of the play. And I remember at the interval saying rather loudly to this person, not realizing who they were, do you know, I couldn't really hear what was going on the first half. These bloody generators were so loud. Turned out it was the person who was actually directly responsible for the sound of the generators being so loud. But it was an interesting thing that Andrew decided that actually that was the world that they were in, a world of sound and fury, at that time signifying rather a lot in that it was so loud. But it was a really interesting idea, and he had them going around, for example, you may recall this. So it was also a toxic, dangerous world that had been poisoned. So the three witches were going around dressed as if they were just checking for what's the word I'm looking for? Things like radium, I suppose. You know, some dangerous substance that would poison us all. So they were going around, searching what was safe, what wasn't safe any longer. So it was a really futuristic way of looking at Macbeth, and yet obviously Andrew, as ever, loved language, and that's a kind of production where he was so bold, and he remains to this day my very favourite Harrogate Theatre director, and that's nothing against.
But he's a very divisive figure in Harrogate itself.
He was a divisive figure, but the fact he was doing it in Harrogate, Graham, In fact, I mean, when you think that this is what Andrew was doing in what was seen as a very conservative town, one incidentally that had been told you cannot still do Agatha Christie plays, you cannot still do Alan Ayckbourn plays, so it had to find some way of being more exciting at that time. And yes, he was a controversial choice, and even more so actually when he went to Ipswich. But if I look back, he did some of the most memorable theatre that I've ever seen. So do you think he was given a harder time than he should have been by the members of the Harrogate public?
Well, I think he got a fair run. It wasn't like they gave him a couple of years and then threw him
No,
out.
that's right.
He was there
That's
for a
right.
while. So, and I think Harrogate Theatre stuck by him quite well, but it was more that part of their audience just wouldn't let up about how they didn't really like his approach to things. But his approach to things needn't have been seen as that modern anyway, because, I mean, they were doing Shakespeare modern costumes in New York in the 1930s under Orson Welles when he was a stage director. So it wasn't really revolutionary, but I suppose the fact it still seems a bit odd to have Shakespeare in modern costume, even now, shows you that no matter how many times you bring a new approach to Shakespeare, the sort of stuffy old traditional version of Shakespeare is the one that's sort of the accepted version still.
But if we're going to look at Imitating the Dog and their work, so again, high on the use of video technology combined with live action. And what you'll have here, you will have one actor playing Romeo, one actor playing Juliet, and then everything else, all other roles, will be played by the three witches. Andrew Quick, who I've interviewed just recently, I guess you've probably done the same maybe, and Peter Brooks are looking on the directing side of it. And then this Simon Wainwright does the video design and the set design. If my memory serves me right, I think he may even have done things with I Like Trains in his time. I think I might be right in saying that.
Probably has, yeah. They're a very visual band.
Yeah. So
but yeah, the thing about the new production of Macbeth is that, the interesting is he set it in modern London in today's gang culture on the streets. That's the interesting thing. On top of that, as well as being visually stunning, because I've seen the stills already for the tour, it looks fantastic. But on top of that, it's not only multimedia. It's not only got lots of songs and music they've created for it, but they've also made up some scenes. So they really are messing around with Shakespeare. They're not leaving the script alone. They're bringing in some of their own scenes and their own dialogue. But I totally trust them, because this is the award-winning company that once did a shot-by-shot recreation on stage of George Romero's classic horror movie from 1968, Night of the Living Dead. So they keep on winning the awards, so they're clearly absolutely brilliant. So I'm really looking forward to seeing
Did you see Night of the Living Dead? Copyright.
No. Well, no, I saw the film. Didn't see the stage version.
So I mean, it is an extraordinary feat. And it all done synchronized with the original Romero work, being recreated with actors holding cameras, etc., and positioning themselves in certain positions on stage in order to be filmed in certain ways, so that they would be seen as being together when in fact the two actors would actually be apart. In those sort of, it was the technology that went into that was absolutely breathtaking, and really exciting theatre, and yet of course celebrating the world of film as well. Whether one says that was their best ever production, I think it was a landmark production in being so audacious in what they did, and taking their possibilities with technology to new levels. But a play like Macbeth has been crying out probably for them to do it. It's one of the plays that so suits being redone in so many different ways. It is the play, along with Romeo and Juliet, that I've seen more than any other play, and I never ever tire of Macbeth. I love seeing the different ways of doing it. It's been done just recently at Leeds, a playhouse, just down the road. Go on, Graham.
Yeah.
You were saying?
It's all about the corrosive nature of power. It's all about the corrosive nature of power. So Shakespeare, the stories don't go out, the narratives don't go out of fashion, because they deal with the world as it is and still is. And the interesting about Shakespeare, which I was talking to Andrew Quick, the director and writer from Imitating the Dog, the interesting thing is that when he was writing these plays, there was not a democracy on the planet. There wasn't real rule of law, not for anybody who wasn't already wealthy. There wasn't fairness. There wasn't any attempt at equality. All these modern civilized, this But if you look at his plays, Shakespeare never sided with the powerful and the greedy and the corrupt.
No.
In fact, he showed how these people are truly horrible, and how they usually come a cropper by being so greedy and corrupt and selfish. And so he was a modern playwright, and he remains a modern playwright. And I think that's why it's fair enough to actually mess around with what he did a bit, because I think if he'd lived to be 500 years old, he'd probably like this sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, it's they're plays that refracted through the times that we live in, and you could do that. And some companies do it in a rather more traditional way. But I think particularly in Macbeth, I think it cries out for modern reinterpretations, because it is, along with, well, actually you could name Julius Caesar, you could name Hamlet, obviously is always seen as reflecting the ages. King Lear will always reflect old age, and the older we get, actually, the more King Lear is a very striking play as one ticks down the years. But I think this, above all other plays that Shakespeare wrote, is the one that we can keep updating to the times we're in. Andrew Manley's play, his production, would exactly confirm that. And I think the fact that Imitating the Dog are prepared to take it that much further by actually writing new scenes to go in it, this idea that somehow Shakespeare should be sacred, I see no reason for that.
No, I think you're right, Charles. I hate stuffy Shakespeare. Absolutely detest it. All that old school acting and over emoting and stiffness. I really don't like it.
No, last year I saw Frantic Assembly doing their version of Othello set in a pool room in a pub. And again, utterly exciting to do. Watched primarily by a young audience because it was part of their GCSE studies, and they were absolutely riveted by it from start to finish, because it was something that they could completely connect with. The language actually was the familiar Shakespeare language, but the way it was edited, it completely was understandable. Which, of course, is the other challenge that's always faced: how you deal with making language from an earlier time make sense to a modern audience, and also not make an audience feel, oh, I don't really know what's going on here. I always feel that is absolutely the duty of a production, is to be clear in how you're presenting Shakespeare, not overcomplicating it, not letting the language dominate to the point that one doesn't know what's going on. Although obviously one of the delights in Shakespeare's comedies is the world of confusion being so much part of that, mistaken identities, taking on different roles, even taking on a different gender, etc. That's part of the comedy world that's created there. But in his world of tragedies, it seems to me there's no excuse to not have coherence. And part of that coherence now, and it's not copping out by doing it, finding fresh language, as with Imitating the Dog, is presenting another way of modernizing so that we absolutely get the maximum impact of the plays.
I think you're right.
We might actually just end this bit, because we're looking at modern theatre. We might as well take my little thoughts on this. I went to see a play that's being. There were two preview performances in the studio at York Theatre Royal, and it's a partnership with both a Hong Kong company called Don't Believe in Style, and with a London company that the director is An-Ting Chang, who is also a concert pianist, as well as directing this piece, as well as being a composer and electronic musician. And it's a piece that's called Home X. So on one level, it's looking at what is home in the modern world. And she actually interviewed people who had come to live in Britain from Ukraine, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from various places across Europe, and who had been needing to find new homes. And so what it was doing it with, though, was they were calling it the future of theatre, because it was using ultra-modern technology to the extent that you had virtual reality involved, you had a 3D designs involved, you had. So we're in the studio, and we're seated in the middle, and there is imagery, projections, 270 degrees of it. So three walls covered in imagery. Now, the way that Hong Kong was involved was that we had both a break dancer stroke actor in Hong Kong, and we had one in the York studio that was being filmed at all times. So the headsets were involved, creating the virtual reality world in which these two break dancers, one in Hong Kong on the screen there, one in York on the screen there were being paired together. And to go with that, they were put into this futuristic world that had been created, this 3D world that had been created 50 years from now. And these two breakdancers, one Hong Kong, one in York, are seen as being invaders. And it's a world in which there's one dominant avatar within it called Mia, who will be passing comment at certain times on the screen. And then the two breakdancers also have lines within it. And though they're completely separated across the world, they end up, through the use of technology, fighting each other with all the sound effects that go with that. And then people who were watching online were able to join in as avatars. Now, and they'd be given a little name, and you'd sort of see them scurrying around at the bottom of the screen or moving around as the scenes were taking place. So very much driven by technology. And yet at the heart of this piece was trying to say what home was, what home meant, what it meant now, what it would ever mean. Are we all, in some ways, as one of the lines that An-Ting used in the piece was, we are all migrants somewhere. That is how we all are. And you had the two characters, the breakdancers, who are coming into this world of the Avatar world. And potentially, could they improve it or could they make it worse? And you see them chopping down trees and then eventually fighting each other. And one line that's written down by the mere avatar character is toxic masculinity, which again was a very strong statement. But ultimately, the piece, I think, was trying to get that sense that we all need some form of sense of home. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a permanent house.
Is this just an excuse to deal with immigration without making it political?
So, I mean, on one level, it is a political piece, but I think it went beyond politics, because I think home is beyond politics. Although home obviously has a huge impact on whether someone actually can have a home or not in a certain country, absolutely. But I think it was trying to show an overall compassion for the need for everybody to have a sense of home in whatever circumstance. So I don't think it was labouring a strong political point on that, just saying that we should all have a right to a sense of home.
So was it actually, did it actually have a strong narrative? Was it in any way
so it was
just an immersive experience?
So it is an immersive experience. But what I liked about it was, for all the fact that, yes, you are working in a world of science, but it is also a world of art. And it did actually get to your heart as well. We weren't just watching some flash technology going in and new techniques of theatre making that are groundbreaking. It did, and I think this was really, really important in the piece, have a sense of soul to it as well. And it was humorous in parts as well. There were some amusing lines within it. It was visually very striking, as I say, because your senses were being played at all the time, because it was an immersive experience. You, as an audience member, were not wearing headsets, so we were not taking part.
This sounds really interesting. I'm sure I'd like it. But if you'd a choice between that and a really classic stage play with fantastic script and absolutely amazing acting, really powerful, what would you go for?
So I'm going to slightly cop out on that, because all the world's a stage, and I'm not in a negative way of, ironically, from Macbeth looking at sound and fury signifying nothing, which some might think actually seeing something that's not hugely reliant just on the language. I think there's room for all sorts of theatre experimentation. So my cop out is that if you can combine the new technology with the brilliant script, as in the production that February 24 and 25 is coming to Harrogate Theatre, Imitating the Dog's Macbeth, that would still be that would be my probably ultimate experience with it. But I think it's really important that you have groundbreaking theatre makers like An-Ting, Chang and her company Kakilang doing what they're doing, because then it opens up possibilities to integrate that into theatre, which is gradually what's happened with multimedia. And you do sometimes need productions that are completely out there, are utterly audacious in what they're doing. And they're taking you to, yes, the science part of it is incredibly important, but it isn't just gimmickry. I think one knows when gimmickry is at work is when there's no word value in it, but there was word value in this piece. And it was exciting to be there.
Well, multimedia in terms of theatre is a bit like sampling in music, and for a
Yes.
long time, samples stood out and were brandished loudly as being just samples without even anything. It's just been subsumed within the whole field of music. At some point, multimedia will end up just being a normal part of theatre. It won't be experimental, revolutionary. And I also advise against gimmickry because, so for example, at Live Aid in the 1980s, when Phil Collins performed at both Wembley and in Philadelphia,
Oh yes,
because he flew in Concorde,
yeah,
and played 2 cities across the Atlantic in a single day. I don't think the fact that he flew Concorde and this was an amazing technical achievement made Phil Collins any better.
No, it didn't. Graham, as we've sort of glided onto music there,
Would it make Ed Sheeran any better?
I didn't watch the start of the Brit Awards. I did catch up with it gradually, and I just sank there at what I was watching. Sort of acceptance speeches that just were cringeworthy. Interviews are just awful. It's as ghastly as the conversations that take place on Jules Holland's Hootenanny, when the music's usually good, but the conversations are just ghastly. And the acceptance speech on behalf of Wet Leg, I could barely string a word together. What is the, anyway, however, want to discuss a rather more serious matter, which actually the heavily awarded Harry Styles.
It's not really serious. You can't take the Brit Awards seriously. I mean, I first mocked the Brit Awards probably about 1988. So there's been very few golden golden periods for the Brit Awards where
this is true.
All the right people that you may like, which obviously makes the right people.
But there were
won the awards, and all the live acts were great, and the presenters were great, and the speeches were great. This never happened.
Well, there were some good performances. There were some good performances last night. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, yeah, there's always some good performances, but I really didn't want to see Wet Leg with a bunch of Morris dancers. I was
no, fair enough. I loved Stormzy's performance. I thought that was beautiful.
Stormzy's a great. If Stormzy did more good songs,
yes,
but he's a great performer. He's got a lot of power. But I just think that the whole thing it's become a sort of circular loop.
Yes,
talking about itself, and it's all completely inward. It's got virtually nothing to do with the real world whatsoever. I mean, I know it never did that much, but it's even got even less to it now. I mean, especially since they changed the categories for the awards last year, so you only have in terms of the main awards, it's just it's a gender neutral award. It's not.
It was an own goal, wasn't it?
Vocal and best female vocal. And this year, of course, the best artist award had no female nominations whatsoever, which makes a complete mockery of the idea behind getting rid of best female act and best male act. So it ended up being a bit of a controversial award ceremony.
And Harry Styles drew attention to 5 female artists that hadn't been nominated. I mean, I don't know whether that was an oversight, quite how such a thing happened, but they certainly shot themselves in the foot with that.
On the other hand,
on the other hand, a lot of the awards were entirely predictable. But Beyonce winning as usual,
Fontaine's DC won the best national act.
That was a breath of fresh air that they should have.
Yeah, no, I like Fontaine's DC, but they probably only sold about 70,000 copies of the last album. So they're probably the lowest selling band to win a major award at the Brits since Belle and Sebastian in 1998. Yeah. So even though I loved them, I thought, it's not. Never mind. But yeah, I think the problem is that the voting in the general categories is done by about 1,200 voters for the music industry in Britain.
Yeah.
And supposedly at least half of those voters are female. So it's not like a male-dominated voting panel or anything. No. And the argument from the Brits is the reason that there was so few female winners was because a lot of the big British female names didn't release new material last year. Like Adele didn't release any new records.
No.
But I seem to remember in the past that there was a time when Kate Bush would win Best Female Act when she hadn't released an album for 5 years. So I'm sure they could have given somebody from who had. I mean, Adele's singles were still selling last year pretty well, even though they're from the year before. So it just seems a bit odd that they went totally for men in the Best Act.
But it's very interesting, isn't it, that they refer that somehow the nominations have to go to big names. That's one of the things that so frustrates me about this. You can support new talent. That's why I get so bored of Beyonce winning everything. I mean, in that category that she won, You could have given it to someone else. Does she have to win every year? I said the same point on Radio York actually the other morning when she'd won 4 more Grammys to become the record Grammy winner of all time. I just think it is so incredibly narrow-minded to keep giving the same awards. To be fair, Harry Styles did have an extraordinary year.
Yeah. But these are industry awards. So industry is a reflection of the money, really. So they're always going to reward the
Would you
biggest
say,
sellers.
Graham, that the Grammys are an industry award as well? Would you say that?
Yeah, but they've also had a tradition of being about as much about quality as sales. I don't know why, but the Grammys are slightly different to the Brits. The Brits are much more industry led than the Grammys.
And the Mercury Music Prize was partly set up in order to get round that and to present a greater emphasis on quality over quantity of how many records you've sold. Although you make that point about Fontaine's DC that went against that. It will be interesting to see what decision then they make next year, whether they'll stick with the gender neutral, which I suspect they will.
I just think that it's a bit silly not to have gender categories because you want to see women winning, and if you're saying that to have a best female vocalist award is an insult to women, well, equally a best male vocalist award is an insult to men. So I never get that. Once you start down this road of getting rid of gender in the awards, you're going to have to bring men and women together in all sports. So before you know it, you're going to have like women get involved with Premier League football teams. But of course, that'll never happen because in the real world, it's about winning. All these things are about winning and success. And in the real world, because of the way history has evolved, women would come second a lot of times, so they wouldn't be represented. So right now, if you have to merge the women's football league with the men's, how many female players are end up on the pitch? Probably not that many. It's the same argument why they don't merge the Scottish leagues with English leagues, because the Scotland teams would do appallingly badly. So the reason you have gender categories isn't because you're sexist. It's because you actually want women to win awards. But of course, just by saying that now it makes me the bad guy.
But because we're now in the world of inclusivity, and of course, the heart of that inclusivity is the unholy song by Mr. Smith and Kim Petras. So, which was one of the standout moments in the Grammys as well. And again, they did a somewhat Frankie Goes to Hollywood fetishistic type performance on the show. But that inclusivity has led to gender neutral judging. And where else can you place Sam Smith? What do you do otherwise?
Well, it's not a problem. It's not the awards. The rule of awards isn't to give a guaranteed space to every type of person on the planet who's making music or is involved with culture, because then rather than like judging things by how good you think they are, you end up having tick box culture where everybody has to get a prize to avoid upsetting someone. Well, that makes a mockery of the whole idea of awards. In awards, there are losers. In the real world, there's winners and losers. Awards, there's winners and losers. And the whole trend towards trying to make everything equal in every regard is doomed to failure.
I think it's a really difficult one, Graham, because we're in a world that is going to be more gender neutral than it's ever been, that is going to have more allowance for completely individual expression. And I think to go against that, I think you'd be fighting against the tide.
No, I'm not against it.
No,
everybody should be able to do. Everybody should be able to do what they want to do, 100%. But you can't organize every organization in the world to reflect every single individual person's point of view. That's just not a practical possibility. And the more you try and do that, the more ridiculous you make everything turn out.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm pretty certain it's going to stay as it is. I just think they'll try to find a way to be more inclusive, which means women being given a fair shout in that. And I do think it wasn't representative this year of female talent within that. And I do think that there's something wrong with the fact that happened. and so I actually think it was done for the best of intentions, and I think we will be having more of the best of intentions happening. The key point you make is about it overall watering down and weakening the awards. I don't think it will ultimately do that. It is a question of actually those who are making the judgments. I mean, they should have been looking at that list and thinking, do you know what? There's no woman on here. We should be thinking about this. How come we've let this happen? You know, that's an alarm bell that should have been set off by themselves at the time.
Yeah, I think you're right, Charles. And
That's
I
what
think
I'd have done.
They should also ban Morris dancing from the Brits. That should never be seen again.
Well, Graham, look, that used to be exclusively for men, Morris dancing, and again, you know, that world has that world has come forward. It's not just men now
Is
doing Morris
Morris a male
dancing.
name? Is Morris a male name?
No, it's not that type of Morris, but of course,
That's good. That's good.
but you know, there were just exclusively male Morris dancing troops. That's been a long-standing tradition, and it's you know, and that was seen as being you know, excluding, and wrongly so. So that world had to change. And so, Graham, I think for once, I think you're being slightly antediluvian in your thoughts. I'm going to say that I'm not agreeing with
I'm being
you.
deliberately. The Brits brings out the worst in me, Charles.
Well, I think the Brits brings out. I think the Brits brings out the worst in the Brits. I mean, overall, I thought, you know, apart from the music in the show, I thought it was an absolute car crash of a show. But that's what I always feel with the Brits.
I think it's a bit like Eurovision, though. It's like a guilty pleasure. It's so bad, it's all good.
I didn't find it that much of a pleasure. I certainly didn't feel any, you know, I felt guilty even watching it at all. But now, Graham, I'm intrigued about the enemy back copies treasure trove at the British Library at Boston Spa. How come the British Library has got enemy back copies? I rather like the fact that they have. But how did this come about? How do you know about this?
Well, I can't tell you. I've got my sources, but I
Got
can't
your
tell you
sources.
how you know about this. But I do know for certain that the British Library at Boston Spa, and obviously the big British libraries in London,
Yeah.
has got all the back copies of every single enemy ever published. And I think
Mm.
it's also got a single Melody Maker ever published. Not sure about Sounds or Reckoner, but it's a possibility. And I know because obviously I'm still writing this book about the life of Harrogate musician, the very talented Chris Simpson of Magna Carta. And then as part of that, I might eventually dig into those archives. So I was trying to find out how you went about it, and it's actually quite straightforward, which is good. But the only problem is that because the London British Library is the main British Library, they can, when they get requests for copies of things, if they haven't got them, they can send out to the Boston Spa Library for those copies and take them down to London. So supposedly, if you turn up at Boston Spa British Library, sometimes there'll be enemies which are down in London because some music writer like Bob Stanley
the enemy
his latest book.
The enemy has always been in London. You should know that as a man from Scotland and me as a man from Yorkshire. That is regularly where the enemy lies. Tell me though, is it on microfiche, or could you actually, if you're needing copies, can you borrow a copy?
The copies. It's real copies. You have to go to the reading room. You have to
you have to sit in the reading room.
Online and something. And you sit in the reading. They bring it to you. You sit in the reading room. They take it away. You can't take it home, and it's not a microfiche. But I was told off the record that somebody's been going to Boston Spa British Library recently to research a new book about Wings, Paul McCartney's band in the 1970s. So you need to time when you go quite careful, otherwise you can find rival music writers who've already snaffled key back copies of NME.
So you could be on a wing and a prayer to win that one, Graham. Yeah.
Exactly.
So we'll have one last little topic, if we may, a kind of interruption piece, which is Edinburgh's Greatest Hits book and the Rolling Stones. We've got 2 minutes to squeeze this in, so let's go for it.
Yeah, well, in 1982, when the Stones were doing the British tour, they announced a secret gig in Edinburgh at the Playhouse, which is, you know, by their standards, quite a small venue. And I was at university at that point doing politics, modern history, and I heard about it. And the tickets could only be bought in person because in those days, you either sent a letter by post or you turn up at the box office and bought the tickets. You couldn't do anything online because it hadn't been invented, really. And so I heard about it, and the Playhouse was about 2 miles from where I was at that point at University of Edinburgh. So I literally ran the 2 miles to get there to get the tickets. And there was a massive queue of about half a mile long.
Yeah.
And I didn't get the tickets. But that's in Edinburgh's Greatest Hits.
Can't always get what you want, Graham.
It's exactly. It's one of those little snippets in the fantastic Edinburgh's Greatest Hits book, which is a very, very good book.
I mean,
although it's very
this
small.
was this a warm up gig? Because I mean, they've been known for doing warm up gigs in London regularly, in sort of almost in sort of bar type places.
Well, yeah, it was a warm up, but I think it was the only non-stadium gig in that tour. So I didn't think they just fancied playing a theatre. But when they play in Canada, they quite often go to a really crap bar in Toronto, which I went
Oh,
inside once when I was in Toronto about 10 years ago.
yeah,
And it really is a dive of a venue, all that wooden floorboards, and it smells really bad.
yeah.
And the Stones just turn up and play there when they're touring. So yeah,
Mm.
this was one of those. But it's that book we got there in the film festival last year.
Oh,
It
yeah,
was
I
great.
remember
It's
that. Yeah,
a little tiny book, which is well worth reading. Very good
yeah,
book.
yeah. Well, Graham, we come to an end this week, and we'll hold back on thoughts on Anthony Beevor's book on Russian Revolution and the Civil War. Heavyweight stuff, but we can't wait
But
to hear about
that
that
was the
next
only
week.
laughs. That was going to be the humor.
I think we'll look forward to that heavyweight number next week, and just remind everybody that go and see Imitating the Dog and Macbeth.
You've been listening to the podcast Two Big Egos in a Small Car. Your hosts were Graham Chalmers and Charles Hutchinson. This was a Baltic sub-production.